Good morning or afternoon or evening, even, to whoever's watching this at this moment. Thank you once again for coming back. Or if you're not, and if it's your first time here, thanks for tuning in. It's been great. It's great having you with us. We are back into our fourth week. Again, back into our YouTube and podcast, whichever you're watching on right now. We are just beginning James chapter 4. As I said at the beginning of this, as we get back into things, we're doing a quick series, 5-part series on James, considering there's only 5 chapters in James, as we swing back into the podcast. And I have enjoyed the last 4 weeks as we've done this again. It's been great. It's been awesome. It's been interesting fixing it in with my current college schedule. But man, do I enjoy sitting here and talking to you guys and preaching the good word. If you have any questions or concerns about what I have to say, about what I am saying, I'd love to have a chat with you about it. Maybe you're right. Maybe, I can fix some things and clear some things up. Maybe you can see what I'm getting at, or maybe we disagree, whatever it is. Whatever the result of the conversation is, I would love to have that conversation with you. I think that's a great conversation. I think it's a great way to build fellowship. It's a great way to connect with each other and grow in the faith. I think having conversations like those is an amazing way to grow. It's way better than me just sitting here preaching to you over a screen or over a podcast. That's for sure. Oh, enough of the pleasantries. Let's get back into James 4. First thing that comes up in James 4 is verse 3. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. It's like, let's say, hey, mom, I want a computer. Okay, well, why do you want a computer? Do you want to do it for schoolwork, or do you want to just, play games or whatever it may be? There's multiple different purposes. There's multiple different purposes for a computer, just like there's multiple different purposes for gifts. Okay, well, I want to speak well. Okay, speaking well, that's a great gift to have. I'm a great speaker myself. I stutter a little bit, as I'm sure some of you have noticed. I have a little bit of a stutter, but overall, I'm a great speaker. I can get up in front of a group of people. I can make a great speech. I have my sermons on here. I'm a great speaker. I'm perfectly comfortable speaking in front of people, making great speeches, and speaking eloquently. But such a great tool can be used for good. Jesus was a great speaker. He spoke the truth. In fact, he was the truth. He was a great speaker and it's changed the world. However, not naming names, but there are also certain people that have used speaking for bad, for evil. I'm sure you can name the names. I don't have to. But this way, it's like we can use it for the good and the bad. And so when we ask for stuff, when we ask for gifts, especially things that do not come naturally, it's not something that God just gives freely and willingly. It's something that's like, okay, well, what are you going to use this for? Are you going to use this to hurt people or to help people? Are you going to use this to fulfill the rest of my laws and my commandments? Or are you just going to use it to goof off and spend it on your own pleasures? As we see in verse 3. When we ask and we do not receive, I think it's important to double check our motives. When we double check our motives and we find them wrong, it's like, oh yeah, that's why I'm not getting this. And so if I really do want this, then let's find out a way that we can make this better, that we can use this for the glory of God, so that we can use this for the right motives. And that takes change on a spiritual level, change that we can't just do on our own, that takes the Holy Spirit. That's a discussion for another day. In fact, I have that topic lined up after we're done with James. So tune in for that one. I think this is going to be a really good one. But moving on. James 4:6. I remember it was the second semester of my junior year in high school. So it was about a year and a half ago. It was almost 2 years ago. I started an internship with a great mentor of mine back home. His name is Jimmy Carter. No, not the president. And he said, Luke, he knows Ms. Luke. He said, Luke, this is your life verse from now on, or at least this is the verse for you for our year. James 4:6, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble, or exalts the humble. That's some translations say. Now, I am not the most humble man on the face of the earth. I'm not. I have some pride. I have some, I have some overwhelming confidence, we could say. Nothing of ill intent, but sometimes I get a little too up there. And so what Jimmy wanted me to do, well, he didn't want God to oppose me. He wanted God to show me favor, he wanted God to exalt me. So of course he's like, Luke, be humble. And I've been working on that. I'm not perfect, sometimes I have my moments, sometimes I just think I'm all that. So I need to do a better job of being more humble, being less proud. I'm working on it. It's a work in progress, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So I would encourage you, hey, I don't want God to oppose you. I want God to show favor to you. So if pride is your issue, let's work on being a little bit more humble. And we can talk some more about what humility means and what that really means. I think I already have a video on it that I recorded in the spring. So go check that out. And if not, I will get to work on making one. We see moving on to verse 7, submit yourselves then to God, resist the devil and he will flee from you. I think that we focus on fighting the devil too much. We focus on the fight. We focus on beating this guy and fighting him and whatever. It's not, you don't have to fight. Sometimes there are things you just can't fight. There are fights you just can't win. Just like we can't beat, just like there are guys out there in the world that we just can't beat physically. There are attacks by the devil, by the opposer, by Satan, by the devil. There are attacks by him. There are fights by him that we just can't beat. There are some things that he tries with us that we can beat, but some things we just can't beat. And so instead of fighting, we resist. In fact, I think he wants us to fight it because it builds conflict, and he loves conflict. However, we as Christians, we should love peace. We do love peace. God encourages us to love peace. We even see that in heavenly wisdom in chapter 3. We see that. In fact, that's the first thing listed, right after it says, but the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure. It says, then peace loving. Wisdom from heaven, wisdom that we want, the way that we should live, it's peace loving. It's not conflict. The fighting, it makes the fight. Satan, the devil, loves fighting. It stirs up conflict. He loves conflict. Instead of just fighting, I think it's important to resist him. Just say, hey, I'm not doing that. And resisting him can be more than just, not doing it. It can be walking away from situations where you're tempted. Sometimes you're in a situation, you're tempted to do something, and that situation just makes you more likely to do it, or you just succumb to it. However, if you feel that temptation and move away from the situation that made you tempted in the first place, well, how are you going to get tempted again? But if you put yourself back in the same situation that you succumb to the temptation, chances are you will succumb to that temptation again. So whenever you feel tempted, knowing that you have failed in resisting this temptation in the first place, remove yourself from that, and that itself is resisting. It sounds like running. In fact, you know what? Straight up, it might be running, but it's a great way to not fall into sin. It's a great way to not fall into that temptation and that sin, right? It's a great way to do it. So, hey, you got to do what you got to do to stay sinless, or at least stay away from sin. And hey, if we resist the devil, even if we don't run away, even if we just sit there and resist and choose not to, maybe we can't get away from a situation. I don't know. Maybe I don't know, us guys, let's say we're sitting there in a class or a meeting, and, we see this pretty girl and we can't stop thinking about her, and things one thing to another, right? As guys just do. Well, okay, we can't walk out of that class. We can't just walk out of that meeting. So we just resist. We say, I'm not going to think about that. I'm going to focus on what's going on. I'm going to focus on learning. And in that way, we resist the devil and he will flee from us. And that way, that temptation will just vanish simply because that we refuse to indulge in it. We refuse to defeat it, and we just simply resist it. Now it kind of goes on there for a second. I skipped multiple verses, about another 7. So we're getting down here to verse 15. We go from the segment of submitting yourself to God to now boasting about tomorrow. We'll give some background on 14. Why you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Mood killer, am I right? And instead we go, and now we go to 15. Instead, you ought to say, if as the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. I think we get so caught up in our own plans, and we get so upset when things don't go our way, when things don't go the way that we think that they should. We get so upset. And I'm like, why? I mean, I get it. Like, I like, trust me, I get it. Like, I got plans. I got stuff I want to do by this, and this. Like, I got stuff I want to do. I got stuff I want to be a part of. But the thing is, if we just sit here and like just think about our own plans and get up and it's just not going to work out all the time. And I think if we just sit there on our own plans, it's going to contradict the Lord's plans. And let me tell you, the Lord will choose to carry out his plans more than yours because his plans are perfect. His plans mean something. His plans are good. There's so many different verses about how good the Lord's plans are, and they are. So if it comes between his plans versus your plans, it's going to be his, and it should be his plans because we are flawed. We are imperfect. We are not perfect. So therefore, our plans are also not perfect. Our plans are also not totally good. And so if I got a plan that's not good, well, I don't want it to happen. It's bad. It's going to be a bad thing. So we should trust God's plans. If it is the Lord's will, we will live that way. We will do this or that. I think that's how we should live. Hey, God, I want this. It's important to have that communication because I do believe that at some points God's like, hey, if you keep praying and asking for this, I'm willing to give it to you. Especially if it's according to my purposes and values. If you really want this and you work for this and you keep praying for this, I believe that God is a giver, that God does give us things, even if it's not, directly like Ken events this, and this. I believe that there are some aspects in the Bible where God just there are just some places in history, in your future, where God, simply because you prayed, simply because you planned with God, God just wrote in your plan as you wish. Now, there are some things that's like, hey, this is what I want to happen. This is what I need to happen. But other things, it's just kind of as you wish. I believe that. But if something is the Lord's will, I believe and I know that we should just choose to do that and be content with that, no matter what that may look like, even if we don't really like it. And then again, as we finish off this chapter in verse 17, if anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. It's not so much as, oh, I messed up and I didn't know better. It's like you know better. Like that's sinning, which is an interesting concept because it's like, well, if you didn't know it was a sin, like, is it really a sin? And we know we have this verse of, the law is written on our heart. So that's a different debate for a different day. It's an interesting concept to think about. I'd encourage talking to your pastor about it. You can email me if you want to ask me about it. I'll make a video soon about talking about it. Be a very interesting thing to do and get into. And it really would. But let's think about this, but in a way where it's just like, okay, let's take a child, let's take a toddler. Okay, let's take a toddler. And this is how I believe that on a simple way, especially like if we go back to the basics of the 10 Commandments, that we kind of know what's right and what's wrong. Look at a toddler. Okay, obviously there are some things about the world that they don't know. Obviously they're going to mess up and they're not going to know any better. I can't come up with an example top of my head, but I'm sure if you're a parent listening, you can think about the time your kids were toddlers and it's just like they messed up and it's not something that they should be doing, but they didn't know that. But in terms of these basic things about how we ought to live, okay, if a toddler, let's say you got marshmallows in the pantry or something, toddler comes in the pantry, finds the marshmallows, wants the marshmallows, but on some level, they know they shouldn't have it, even if it wasn't expressly said, because what will happen is the toddler, they'll look around, they'll reach out, they'll take the marshmallows, and then they'll go back around the couch and they'll hide and eat them. Like I remember I would take food in my room, which I already knew I wasn't supposed to take food in my room right from the beginning. That's basically how it was growing up 101. But like when it came to eating food like marshmallows just out of the pantry, like I knew on a level, I somehow had to have known on a level I shouldn't have been eating them. That's why I took them up my room to hide the fact that I ate them, if that makes sense. So it's like, yeah, I kind of knew, like, yeah, don't touch the marshmallows, don't eat the marshmallows, but I wanted them, so I went out and I hid and did it instead of just eating them like in the kitchen because I knew it was wrong because I knew I messed up and I'm not just moving away from the marshmallow analogy. It could be anything, but I think it's like that with us and sin, with certain sins, like these basic sins. It's like, yeah, we know not to do it, but right. So it's just this crazy little dance here. So if you know what is good, but you want to do something bad, stick to what's good. Stick stick to being pure and blameless. Now, if you mess up but you didn't know any better, that's a whole different story altogether. I'm sure we can get into that another time. But as for right now, stick to what is good. Stick to what is is good. I highly encourage you to do that because, well, we should act in good godly manners. that's just that's just the way we ought to live. Well, that is all I have for you guys for chapter 4. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. It's awesome having you with me. It's awesome being back here. Next week is our last week of James. Make sure to tune into that. Make sure to finish things off there. And thank you once again for being back with me. I really enjoy it. Thank you for your patience over the 7-month break that we had. Very glad to be really back into things as we finish 5 next week. And we will now have we have some guests lined up. I have some people that I would love that that have agreed to be on the show at some point. I don't know when. I don't know when that'll get out, but I know it's going to happen at some point. I know we have good discussions and good things to talk about. We don't know how long it could take. It could take a while because again, some really great conversations. So make sure you tune into those. Make sure you tune into future episodes and podcasts about different random things that we may or may not do. As I'm sure most of you know, watching me right now, I also have a podcast. It's called the Living for His Glory podcast. It is on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If that's an easier listen to you, if that's an easier way for you to listen to my videos and learn about Christ, I highly encourage you to go listen to those. It'll have the same topics, the same conversations. It'll just be in the podcast and non-visual form. Well, again, I encourage you to go check that out. Encourage you to come back with me next week for our last week and chapter of James as we dive into James 5. And thank you so much for being with me. Once again, I am Lucas Barrett, your host, and I'm signing off until next week. Have a great week.